Naya stood her ground, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her gaze never wavered from the colossal dragon before her. His scales shimmered like 1,000 rubies in the faint light of the cavern, and his eyes burned with ancient fire. "I've come alone," she said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "I'm seeking help, not hunting you." A low rumble started deep in the dragon's chest, erupting into a laugh that shook the very mountain. Small stones tumbled from the ceiling. "Help?" Calyx scoffed, smoke curling from his nostrils like twin vipers. "Humans slaughtered my kind, hunted us to the brink of extinction, and now one of you dares to crawl back begging for help?" "That wasn't me," Naya shot back, her fear giving way to resolve. "I wasn't alive then. Neither were my grandparents or their grandparents before them." The dragon circled her, a predator sizing up its prey. His shadow danced and loomed, large enough to swallow her whole. "Why should I care about human problems?" he hissed. "Let the darkness take you all, it would be a fitting end." Naya didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, intricately carved figurine. It was a dragon, crafted from dark wood, its wings spread in a protective arc. "This was my father's," she said, holding it out. "He carved dragons not as monsters, but as guardians, as protectors. Some of us still remember the stories that were forgotten." Calyx paused, his massive head lowering to examine the trinket. The detail was remarkable, a testament to a forgotten respect. "Pretty trinkets change nothing," he grumbled, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "This isn't just a human problem," Naya pressed on, sensing a sliver of an opening. "The necromancer, Malachi, he doesn't just threaten my people. He corrupts everything he touches, the land, the water, the creatures of the wild. If he succeeds, there will be nothing left for anyone. Nothing will remain but rot and shadows." Calyx let out a long, slow breath, a plume of smoke clouding the air between them. "And what would you have me do? One dragon against an army of darkness?" "Fight alongside us," Naya said simply, her words bold and clear. "Show us how. The ancient scrolls say dragons once taught humans to channel fire magic. Teach me." The dragon fell silent, his golden eyes studying her, searching for lies, for weakness. He found only desperation and a strange, stubborn courage. Finally he spoke. "I will see this threat for myself before I decide anything," Calyx declared. "Nothing more." As they emerged from the mountain cave, the morning sun struck Calyx's scales, setting them ablaze with crimson light. For the first time in centuries, he stretched his magnificent wings to their full, awe-inspiring span. Naya watched, breathless, as he launched himself into the sky. The legends, she realized, had barely captured a fraction of his true majesty. He was not just a beast of myth, he was power and fire given form. That evening, Calyx returned. He landed with a ground-shaking thud beside her small campfire, the force of it nearly extinguishing the flames. He looked grim, his usual arrogance replaced by a heavy silence. "You spoke the truth," he admitted, his voice a low growl of reluctance. "The corruption, it spreads faster than I had imagined. The forests are sickening, the rivers running black." Hope surged in Naya's chest. "Will you help us then?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Calyx fixed her with an intense stare. "I will teach you," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Though I doubt a fragile human like you will survive the first lesson." 3 weeks later, Naya felt like a different person. The training was brutal, relentless. Every day, Calyx pushed her past her limits, his methods harsh and unforgiving. But under his demanding guidance, she discovered something incredible within herself. A latent connection to fire magic, a rare gift among humans. In the foothills where they'd made their camp, he taught her to draw on that inner heat, to channel and shape it. "Your movements are clumsy. Your focus is weak," Calyx criticized, his voice a constant, grating presence. He watched as she struggled to form a simple shield of fire, sweat beading on her forehead and dripping into her eyes. "I'm trying," she gritted out, her muscles screaming in protest. Their constant bickering was cut short by a sound that chilled them both. A distant, human scream carried on the wind. Naya's head snapped up. In the distance, a column of dark smoke was rising from the direction of Rivermeet, a small settlement just 2 miles away. Shadow creatures, Calyx growled, a dangerous light entering his eyes. They're here. Earlier than expected. There was no need for discussion. Without a word, they moved as one. Calyx took to the sky, a crimson bolt against the blue. Naya, now mounted on a sturdy horse she'd acquired from a friendly farmer, galloped hard across the plains. They arrived to find pure chaos. The village of Rivermeet was overrun. Writhing, featureless shadows with gleaming red eyes swarmed through the streets. Their touch was like death itself, leaving behind frost-burned victims who collapsed in agony. The villagers fought back with torches and farm tools, but their efforts were largely futile against the supernatural onslaught. Now we see if your training was a waste of my time. Calyx's voice boomed from above as he dove straight into the fray. A torrent of dragonfire erupted from his maw, incinerating a dozen shadow creatures in an instant and creating a corridor of safety for fleeing villagers. Naya took a deep breath, centering herself as he had taught her. "Focus on your heartbeat," she whispered, the words a mantra. She thrust both hands forward. Streams of brilliant fire erupted from her fingertips, cutting a fiery swath through 3 of the shadow creatures, which dissolved with a piercing shriek. The villagers stared, their terror momentarily forgotten, replaced by disbelief. First, a dragon from legend appears to defend them, and now a woman wielding fire like a god. Fighting together, Naya and Calyx began to turn the tide. His overwhelming power and her precise targeted strikes created a deadly combination. They pushed the invasion back, street by street, until the last shadow creature dissipated into nothingness. The village was saved. Exhausted, the remaining villagers approached them cautiously. An elderly woman, her face etched with grief and gratitude, stepped forward. "You saved us," she said, her voice trembling as she looked from Naya to the colossal dragon. "Both of you." "This was merely a scouting force," Calyx warned, his voice a low rumble that echoed with grim certainty. "Malachi will send worse. Much worse." As if summoned by his name, a horrifying horn blast echoed from the distance. It was a sound that seemed to drain the warmth from the air. Without a second thought, Naya scrambled onto Calyx's broad, scaly back, surprising them both with her boldness. "We need to see what's coming," she explained, her voice tight with urgency. Calyx ascended, climbing high into the air. From their vantage point, they witnessed a sight of pure horror. Marching across the plains was an army of corrupted, twisted creatures, and leading them were 3 winged forms that made Calyx's breath catch in a strangled gasp. "Impossible," he whispered, his entire body tensing beneath her. Naya stared at the abominations. They had the shape of dragons, but their flesh was rotting, their bones exposed, and their eyes glowed with the same malevolent green light of Malachi's magic. They were dragon corpses, reanimated and twisted by dark necromancy. Naya felt a tremor run through the powerful body beneath her, not of fear, but of profound rage and violation. She placed a hand on his neck. "They're not really dragons anymore, Calyx," she said gently, her voice firm. "They're just his puppets." Calyx's voice hardened, turning as cold and sharp as obsidian. "Then it's time," he snarled, "to cut their strings. Consorting with the beast." Elder Thorn's voice boomed across the village square, each word a hammer blow against Naira. She stood tall before the council, her chin held high despite the accusing glares. "While we appreciate the medicine you bring, these daily visits to the crystalline range raise grave concerns." Naira's voice was firm, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Riven is not a beast. He's the last of an ancient race, the crystal dragons who once protected these very lands. The dragon has bewitched her." A voice whispered from the sea of faces, a ripple of fear and suspicion spreading through the villagers. Naira's heart ached. They saw only a monster, not the noble, lonely creature she had come to know. Miles away, high in his mountain valley, Riven felt a tremor that had nothing to do with Nyra's plight. A disturbance. Dark, malevolent energies stirred in the far reaches of his territory. It was a magic he hadn't felt in centuries, a chilling echo from the Great Divide War. The void wraiths, spectral hunters summoned long ago to extinguish the light of his kind, were awakening. A cold dread seeped into his ancient heart. When Nyra returned to the mountain, she was no longer a villager of Elder Hollow. She was an exile, banished but unbowed. Riven met her not with his usual calm but with a sense of urgency that startled her. "You cannot stay," he rumbled, his great crystalline head low. "Ancient enemies approach. It is not safe for you here." Nyra didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward and placed her hands on either side of his massive face, a gesture so intimate, so fearless, that Riven's core crystal pulsed with a blinding warm light. "I won't leave you," she said, her voice soft but unbreakable. "I will not let you face them alone. My place is here, with you." The conviction in her eyes silenced his protests. In that moment, he understood. She was not just a healer. She was his ally, his anchor in a world that had forgotten him. That night, as silver moonlight bathed the valley, something extraordinary happened. Riven, who had not worn a mortal guise in 1,000 years, began to change. Light shimmered around him, his colossal form shrinking, reforming. When the light subsided, he stood before Nyra, still towering over her, his skin shimmering with faint crystalline patterns, but shaped as a man. The sight stole her breath. He was beautiful, ancient, and powerful, all contained within a form she could finally meet eye to eye. He reached for her, his touch hesitant. Their first kiss was a tentative bridge between worlds, a fragile connection that had been severed for too long. It was the taste of starlight and ancient earth, of loneliness and a dawning hope. "This has never happened," Riven whispered against her lips, his voice a low vibration that resonated deep within her soul. "A dragon's heart, once it is shattered, cannot heal." He looked down at his own chest, where a network of fine cracks marred the surface of his core crystal. A permanent scar from a forgotten war. "Perhaps," Nyra replied, her fingers tracing the patterns on his arm, her gaze unwavering. "It only needs the right healer." She drew him closer, and in her embrace, the great crystal dragon felt a warmth he thought was lost to him forever. The night air grew cold as the void wraiths descended, their spectral forms blotting out the stars. They swarmed Elder Hollow with merciless intent, their chilling whispers promising oblivion. The villagers, armed with farming tools and hunting bows, were utterly unprepared for such ancient evil. Panic and screams filled the streets as the spectral hunters began to feed on their life force. Just as all hope seemed lost, a crystalline roar split the night sky, a sound of pure power and protective fury. Riven soared above the village, a magnificent, terrifying sight. And upon his back, holding on with unwavering trust, was Nyra. Her hands were pressed flat against the great heart crystal on his back, her own healing energy pouring into his essence, amplifying his power. Light erupted from Riven, a sunburst of crystalline energy that slammed into the wraiths. Together, dragon and healer became a beacon against the darkness. They drove the wraiths back, their combined power a symphony of protection. But they weren't entirely victorious. In the chaos, Elder Thorn, the very man who had banished Nyra, was struck down, his life fading under a wraith's chilling touch. Without hesitation, Riven landed with a ground-shaking thud beside the fallen elder. The villagers scrambled back in terror, but Riven ignored them, his gaze fixed on the dying man. "Let me help him," he rumbled, his voice echoing with ancient authority. Nyra slid from his back and knelt beside the elder. She worked alongside the dragon, combining her knowledge of human medicine with Riven's powerful, life-giving magic. The villagers watched, mesmerized, as a warm, crystalline light flowed from Riven's claw into the elder's wound, guided and woven by Nyra's gentle hands. As Elder Thorn's eyes fluttered open, gasping for air, the people of Elder Hollow witnessed what their ancestors had long forgotten. The true purpose of the alliance between their kinds was not one of fear, but of symbiosis and mutual protection. In the months that followed that fateful night, the healing spread. It went beyond the wounded villagers to the land itself. With the threat of the void wraiths neutralized, a new era of cooperation began. The formidable mountain barriers, once a symbol of division, started to come down as Riven and Nira worked together to establish a sanctuary for learning and growth. Humans traveled into the crystalline range not with fear, but with curiosity, drawn by the newfound peace. Other magical creatures, long in hiding from a hostile world, began to emerge from the shadows, finding refuge in the valley. On the first anniversary of their victory, Riven and Nira stood at the highest peak of the range, overlooking their flourishing integrated realm. Below, humans, dragons, and fey creatures mingled in the burgeoning community of what was now called Sanctuary. Riven looked down at his own chest, a look of profound wonder on his face. He placed a hand over his heart crystal. The web of cracks that had scarred it for millennia was gone. It glowed with a perfect, unbroken internal light. "My heart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never believed this was possible." Nira took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. "Love is the oldest magic of all," she replied softly, her eyes reflecting the dawn. "And the strongest." As the sun broke over the crystalline range, its first rays struck Riven's healed heart. The light refracted, scattering across the valley below. Everywhere a beam of light touched, a new small crystal formation began to grow from the earth. Each one born from a shard of Raven-A's once broken heart, now whole, multiplied and shared with all who sought refuge and healing in their new world. Their kiss, witnessed only by the rising sun, was no longer tentative. It was a promise, a testament to their bond, sealing a love that would inspire legends for generations to come. The legend of the dragon, whose shattered heart was made whole by the healer who was brave enough to love him. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the world of Nira and Riven. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of magic and adventure. We'll see you in the next one. The nights around the campfire became their sanctuary. As they journeyed north gathering allies, Calyx found himself sharing stories no human had heard in centuries. Tales of ancient dragon society, their music, their art, their philosophy. He spoke of love, arguments, and even terrible mistakes. Naya listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just resting against his warm scales, her presence a strange comfort. One evening, Calyx finally asked the question that had been lingering in his mind. "Why did you really awaken me? There must have been other options." Naya stared into the dancing flames. "My mother used to tell me stories about dragons, wise, fierce protectors. When she died, I held on to those stories. And when the shadows came for us, I remembered the scrolls I'd glimpsed in Elder Thorn's library. It felt like destiny." Their gazes met, something unspoken passing between them. Calyx, who had lived for millennia, felt a peculiar warmth in his chest he'd never known before. Uncomfortable with the new feeling, he abruptly declared, "We should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." That night, as Naya slept curled near him for warmth, Calyx kept watch. He studied her face, the determination etched there even in sleep, the surprising strength in her small human form. The thought of the necromancer Malachi threatening her stirred something ancient and fiercely protective within him. He was a dragon, a creature of immense power, yet this small human had somehow become his anchor. Their quiet was shattered the next morning. Scouts returned with grim news. Malachi's forces had surrounded Ashfall, Naya's home village. "He knows about us," Naya realized, her voice tight with fear. "He's drawing us in." Calyx nodded, his golden eyes hardening. "He wants me, the essence of the last true dragon. With it he could achieve immortality." "Then we don't go," Naya insisted, her voice pleading. "It's a trap." "We must," Calyx replied, his voice a low rumble. "But we will not go alone." They arrived at the ridge overlooking Ashfall with 200 fighters from the villages they had defended. Below, the magical barriers protecting her home flickered weakly against a relentless assault of shadow creatures. "I never thought I'd return with a dragon ally," Naya said, a mix of awe and sorrow in her voice. Calyx nudged her gently with his snout, a surprisingly tender gesture. "And I never thought I'd fight alongside a human I trusted." The admission hung between them, significant and fragile. "Calyx," Naya began, placing her hand on his scales, her touch grounding him. "If we don't survive this, we will," he interrupted, his voice firm with a conviction that startled them both. "I have too much to live for now." His eyes met hers, and in that moment, a profound understanding passed between them, a connection that transcended species, time, and fear. Something rare and precious that neither had ever expected to find. Dawn broke blood-red over Ashfall. Naya and Calyx led their forces into the valley. Shadow creatures swarmed the ground while corrupted dragon puppets, grotesque parodies of Calyx's kind, circled overhead. At the center of the chaos stood Malachi himself, tall, gaunt, veins of darkness pulsing beneath his skin. "The last dragon comes." Malachi's voice echoed unnaturally across the battlefield. "Your essence will complete my transformation." Calyx's only response was a torrent of fire, which Malachi deflected with a casual, arrogant wave. The battle erupted. Naya fought alongside the villagers, her own fire magic a beacon of hope, cutting through the shadows while Calyx engaged the corrupted dragons in the sky. "They're distracting us," Naya realized, spotting Malachi performing a dark ritual at the village center. "We need to reach him directly." She let out the sharp whistle they had practiced. Calyx broke away from his aerial combat and swooped low. With a practiced leap, Naya landed on his back and they soared toward Malachi, dodging shadow attacks from all sides. As they neared, Malachi unleashed tendrils of pure shadow that wrapped around Calyx, dragging him from the sky. They crashed near the ritual circle where dark energy pulsed from an obsidian altar. "Your essence will fuel my ascension," Malachi gloated, binding Calyx with chains of shadow. The power of the last dragon mine to command. Naya attacked frantically, but the necromancer, empowered by his ritual, knocked her aside with contemptuous ease. She watched in horror as he began to extract a glowing, ethereal essence from Calyx's chest. "You fight alone," Malachi taunted the struggling dragon, "the last of your kind, forgotten and unloved." Across the battlefield, Calyx's eyes found Naya's. "Not alone," he gasped, his voice strained but clear. "Not anymore." Those words ignited something within Naya. Drawing on every lesson Calyx had taught her, she focused not on the fire around her, but the fire within. A golden flame, pure and brilliant, erupted from her, engulfing her entire body, but leaving her unharmed. "His essence isn't yours to take," she cried, her voice ringing with newfound power as she charged into the ritual circle. The necromancer screamed as Naya's fire, a unique fusion of dragon magic and sheer human will, burned through his shadows. High above, the corrupted dragons, their puppet master's control severed, fell from the sky. Malachi, in a final act of desperation, lunged at the weakened Calyx with a dark dagger. But Naya intercepted. The blade pierced her shoulder, but she grabbed Malachi's arm, channeling all of her blazing energy directly into him. The necromancer's body couldn't contain such pure, untainted fire. He disintegrated into a cloud of ash that scattered on the wind, taking his entire shadow army with him. As the last shadow faded, Naya collapsed beside Calyx, who had finally broken free of his weakened bonds. "Reckless human," he murmured, nudging her gently with his head. "Stubborn dragon," she replied weakly, a faint smile on her lips. Her healing took days. Calyx never left her side. Elderthorn later remarked that he'd never seen dragon tears before, and that they seemed to possess incredible healing properties. When Naya finally stood again, she and Calyx climbed to the highest ridge overlooking the valley. Life was already returning. Small shoots of green pushed through the soil where darkness had once reigned. "What will you do now?" Naya asked softly. Return to your slumber? Calyx gazed across the reborn landscape. I thought I was the last of my kind, that extinction was my fate. But perhaps being the last dragon isn't about being the final one to exist. What do you mean? She asked, turning to face him. Perhaps, he said, his voice filled with a hope he hadn't felt in centuries. It's about being the beginning of something new. There are eggs hidden in mountains far to the east. I never thought they could hatch without others of my kind, but your fire magic, it's not entirely human. Naya looked down at her hands, a look of wonder on her face. Dragon fire and human spirit, Calyx continued, his golden eyes soft. Perhaps that's what the world needs now. If you're willing to journey with me. Naya's smile was all the answer he needed. She placed her hand on his scales, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart matching the rhythm of her own. A new beginning, she agreed, for both of us.